Dear student friends, in this lecture we are going to discuss research process in social sciences. Before taking up the discussion on research process in social sciences, let us first discuss what we mean by research. Research is nothing but researching for new facts and truths. That means we are systematically, logically discovering new facts and truths in order to establish or reconfirm the existing theory or to reject the existing theory. It is called research. But there is a difference in research when we call in pure science and when it is applied in social science research. Because in social science research you cannot have the same meaning and approach with regard to the research, because there are fundamental differences in research approaches with regard to the science as well as the social science researchers. Here in this lecture we are going to concentrate only on the research process in social sciences. Before that, let us quickly look at what are the major differences between the science, research in science and social sciences. The basic important difference is in science, in pure sciences, the research is done in a laboratory in a conditioned manner, whereas in the social sciences the research is done in a laboratory, but the laboratory is a society. The society is the laboratory in social sciences. Here the objects are human beings. Likewise, the other major difference is when you have the research in pure sciences, the whole objects, they have some homogeneity, uniformity. But whereas when you take the social science researches, the objects are heterogeneous. They are variety, they are diverse in nature, their behavior, their characters, because it deals with the human beings. That is the problem. The another problem is with regard to the social science and the pure science research, the applicability. Whatever the results are obtained in pure science, it is applicable throughout the world universally. Whereas social sciences, it is only the context oriented. You cannot have universal application or generalization based on the results of a particular research in social sciences. That is another major difference between the pure research and the social science research. The another thing is about the predictability. You can predict 100% in sciences, whereas in social sciences only you can predict to a certain extent, that to the context with which we are having the approach or we are studying, because it is a context bound and that too it is applicable to only a limited extent. That is the another difference between the pure and the social science researchers. Then about the another difference between these two things is about the verifiability. The sciences, wherever you want, you can verify, either in a remote corner of India or in any part of the world, you can just put into the test and it is empirically verifiable. But in the social sciences, you cannot empirically verify and test it, because the results may vary from one place to another place, one country to another country, because it's a cultural bound and there are other factors, variables that affect the results. That is another problem. Then the last one is about the social sciences normally are attached with values, value system, value ordered. But whereas the science approaches, the research is purely, there is no morals or values attached to the scientific research. So these are some of the differences with which we have to approach the social science researchers. So without knowing these differences, one cannot just blindly apply the research methods and techniques which are applicable to the pure science subjects. So that's what we are going to discuss in this class, that is the research process in social science subjects. So let me first have this. There are about 5 stages, important stages in social science researches. The first important stage is research design. Then the second one is sampling. The third one is data collection. Fourth one is data analysis. The fifth one is report writing. So let us take up the first one, that is research design. Normally the research design means it is a blueprint or a sketch. Like an architect, a researcher has to design the entire thing, A to Z, all the minute details, like a sketch, what an architect does before he constructs a construction. The researcher has to do the research design. The research design is done in order to have a clear picture of what we are going to do in the research. That's what we have, we said, that is the mapping or the sketching of the whole research. So in research design, what are the things we have to take care of? The first thing is the statement of the problem. What do you mean by the statement of the problem? Statement of the problem is the problem under investigation, the problem which we have taken for analysis in our research. That should be clearly stated in our research. That is, what is the purpose, why we have taken, what is the rationale for selecting this particular research topic for our research. So that should be clearly defined in research design itself, so that you can proceed further in a smooth manner without any problem. The second important thing which we have to keep in mind while designing research design is about the review of literature. That means the researcher has to go through the existing literature, available literature on his research areas in order to familiarize the theories, the concepts, the hypotheses that have been arrived at in the existing literature. That is more important. So unless you know what has been done, what was there in the relevant field, relevant literature, one cannot go further. So the reviewing in the existing literature is an important stage, a step in the whole research process. And the third one is about conceptualization. Conceptualization is, we are in social sciences, we use so many concepts. Concepts like democracy or secularism or totalitarianism or anything. If you take any concepts like this, these concepts are to be defined and conceptualized and operationalized in order to make it clear when it is used in the theory. So unless you are clearing the concepts through the way of definition or operation definition or conceptualization, it will lead to a lot of confusion. So it is better always define in the research design stage itself what are the concepts you are going to employ, what do you mean by these concepts in your research. That is to be explained very clearly. The next important thing is objectives. After all, without any objectives or any purpose, one cannot undertake any research. For that matter, any research, whether in social science or any sort of research. So the objectives here, what we mean, though we have spelt out the rationale behind for selecting this topic in statement of the problem, here the objective means what are the specific objectives we have in mind which are going to be pursued in this particular research. So that objectives you have to spell out 1, 2, 3 like that. You have to spell out clearly what are the objectives you have in mind while you are taking up this particular research, so that these objectives will guide you to get the required result without any problem. That is another thing we have to keep in mind in research design while you design the research design. The next one is hypothesis. What is hypothesis? Hypothesis is an intelligent guess or an observation based on our own experience, and we try to link two or more variables and give some sort of our own explanation or answer to a problem. So when you construct a hypothesis based on your observation or based on the existing theory or based on your the literature, then it is called hypothesis. So the hypothesis which you have framed for your research should be tested. So without hypothesis you cannot proceed research in a systematic manner. So hypothesis you have to frame in such a way that it is a guiding post. It will guide you to properly go in a planned manner, and that also delimits the boundary. If you have a hypothesis or a few hypotheses, the hypothesis will guide you where to pursue, what are the aspects you are going to analyze in your research, that it will take care of. So the hypothesis also to be framed clearly in a pointed manner in the research design itself. The next one is methodology. Here in social sciences we have many types of methodologies. Here methodology means what are the methodology you are going to adopt. For example, whether it's going to be a descriptive one or explorative one, or the case study method or observation method or interview one, and all these things you have to clearly mention. But these methods depends upon the nature of the topic. You cannot just employ a particular method to any topic as you wish. The methods depends upon the nature of the topic under investigation. So the methodology also takes care of what are the types of the sample you are going to take, what are the sources you are going to cite, all these things the methodology will take care of. The period of study and all these things will cover under these things. Then the next important thing in the research process of research design is delimitation. Delimitation is nothing but delimiting the boundary of the research in terms of issues, or in terms of the period, or in terms of a particular policy or issues or anything. So for example, if you are going to have a research on for your PhD Indo-American relations during Clinton's period, here you are delimiting clearly in terms of the period, in terms of the years. And even then you can also delimit Indo-American relation during the Clinton periods with regard to nuclear issues. So here you are delimiting further, and you are delimiting in terms of issues. So the delimitation can be in terms of years, in terms of period, or in terms of issues, or in terms of anything, or themes, or something like that. So delimitation is very important, so that it is delimited in such a manageable level, and it will also solve so many practical problems in research. That is another thing. The last one in the research design is chapterization. Chapterization, or it's also called plan of the study, because you cannot have all the chapters in hand before just you venture into the research activities in the initial stage itself. But you can have an abstract of the titles of the chapters, or an idea about what are the things you are going to have in each chapter, because each chapter should have a logical link with one another, as well as it has an extension of the one another. So naturally you have to have the logical continuity throughout the chapter. So unless you frame the chapters, unless you finalize the chapters in the initial stage itself, when you are drawing the research design itself, it is very difficult. So when you have the chapterization, it's almost clear that you are going to have only for this, and you will be asked to collect the data and other things only for these chapters, and your analysis and all the things which will be followed will be centering around all these chapters. So chapterization is another important area in the research design. The researcher has to take care of things. Okay, the next thing in the whole research process in social sciences is sampling. Sampling is nothing but, in a vast area, in a scattered geographical area, you cannot go and do research throughout India, or you cannot have millions of people for your investigation. So the sampling is, you are taking a portion out of a huge population, or out of a vast area in terms of geography, and you are taking a portion out of these things. But this portion, a small portion in terms of geographical units or in terms of human numbers, it should represent, the small portion should represent the heterogeneous, the characteristics, the traits of the whole population, the universe. So when you are taking about 5,000 people as sample for a public opinion study or a voting behavior study, these 5,000 units, the sample units should reflect 5 million voters in a constituency or in a state. So these 5,000 units, these characters, in such a way it should reflect the entire population's characters or the traits. So that is called sampling. Sampling is very important because there is no standard pattern, or there is no strict formula that the sampling should be 5% or 10% or 20%. So there is no such clear cut instructions or guidelines. So the sampling size depends upon the nature of your research, the nature of your research project. So the sample could be 1% or 0.5%. Suppose let us take an example. When the Pranay Rai and other the leading marketing groups, they conduct the opinion polls during the Lok Sabha elections across the country in India throughout 543 constituencies, about 700 million voters. Is it possible to have a 1% of voters? 1% comes to several, I think 1% 700 million, it comes about a million and odd. So it's very difficult to conduct even 1% sample, a survey among 1% sample of the whole electorate. So it is not a matter whether we should have a 1% or 2% or 5%. It's more important is how you are selecting the sample, on what basis you are selecting the sample. That is more important rather than the size of the sample. So that is more important. So let us quickly look at what are the types of sample available in social science researches. We are all aware, we might have heard about the famous random sampling. That is the first one. What do you mean by random sampling? Random is, in this method of sampling, all the units should have a chance of being selected in the sample units. That means those who are constituting the universe or population shall have a chance of being selected as a unit, as a sample. That is called random sample. In the random we have so many other sub branches of sampling. The next one is stratified sampling. Many social science researchers, they use this method of sampling, that is called stratified sampling. Stratification means these samplings or units are stratified in terms of age, in terms of caste, in terms of religion, or in terms of some other variables, in such a manner that all the variables are given representation in the whole study. So that is called stratified sampling. That is a standard one normally used by the social science researchers. Another type of sample is quota sampling. Quota means, for example, you are going to have a survey among various religious groups about their attitude towards a particular government policy. So here, if you are going to have survey among Hindus, Muslims, Christians and other religious groups, so can you have 25% each for all these four groups? No, it's not possible, because if you are going to have going to allot only 25% for the 83% or 82% of the people, the Hindu religious people, then it will be distorting. So the quota sampling is, you have to allot the sample size according to the strength of their population, according to the proportion of their strength in the total population or in the universe. So that is called quota sampling. Then you have another sampling type, that is multi-stage or cluster sampling. This is nothing but you are selecting a sample at different levels. For example, you can take a few samples at the village level, then another few samples at the taluk level, then district level, then state level. At all levels, you are all the stages, you are giving some representation to all the stages. That is called multi-stages or cluster. So another type of sampling is called convenient sampling or purposive sampling. The term itself denotes a convenience, at the convenience of the researcher, or for a particular purpose, the researcher can select the sample as per his wishes. For example, for the convenience in the sense, he has his own physical or other limitations, so he can confine to a particular area for a jail inmate or to a particular group of people in his own locality, or for the purpose when the TV groups, they conduct interviews to get the opinions of the people across the country. They cannot just go on random or any other certified sampling. Just they will go to the street and they will get some people and they will get their feedback. So that is called a convenience or purposive sample. Okay, now let's go to the next stage of the research process in social science, that is data collection. What do you mean by data? Data is it's an information in the form of a material, a printed or spoken or any form. That's a material, the resources used for research. That's called data. So data collection is when you are collecting the information, resources for a research purpose, it is called data collection. Data is divided into two types of data. One is primary data, another one is secondary data. So first let us take up what are the things that are called primary data and what are the things that are called secondary data. Before classifying these two things, we have to caution that not always the primary data will remain primary data. Likewise, the secondary data need not remain secondary data always in all researches. Depending upon the research, depending upon the context with which we are using the data, varies as a primary data or a secondary one. But normally, let us see the certain methods, certain data collections which are called primary data, that is observation. Whatever we collect through our observation, personal observation, that is called primary data, because we ourselves through our sense organs we gather information, we collect the information, then it is called observation, then it comes under the primary data category. The second one is interview. We conduct interviews with the respondents, with the leaders or with a group of people with whom we are getting the record information from the respondents, that is called interview. That also forms as a primary source, as a primary data. Then the third one is questionnaire. Questionnaires are used to elicit the information from the respondents from various walks of life. Whatever the information the respondents give, it forms as a primary source, as a primary data. Then the documents. The documents here you may call any, the reports or constitution or some treaties or all these things constitute as documents. Again, when you are using it in a particular context as a primary source, it can be as a and called as a primary source. Diaries, for example, diaries of important leaders or the diaries of heroes or all personal diaries of a particular individual, all these things constitute as primary data. The secondary source, normally the books, journals, newspapers, reports, and sometimes other documents like a Law Commission report or a ILO report or UNO report, and all this comes under the secondary sources, secondary data. Okay, now let us move to the next stage of social science research process, that is data processing, analysis and interpretation. In this, the first thing is data processing. So let's see what it contains, data processing. In the data processing, there are three things. One is the first stage. First one is editing, the second one is coding, the third one is feeding. That means first you are going to edit whatever the sources, whatever the material you have collected. When you are collecting the material, you are not going to collect just only the 100% relevant material. You may collect a massive sources for your research purpose. But all the sources which we have collected, all the materials we have collected need not be used for our research purpose always. But sometimes some sources may not be relevant at that point of time. So we have to edit what are the data which are really relevant, really useful for our research. Then after editing, that particular material or resources only should be coded. The next stage is coding. Coding means what? You have to assign certain numerical values. For example, we have scales, 5-point scale, 3-point scale, 4-point scale. Depending upon the nature of yours, you can assign any scale and you can assign the value and you can code it. After coding it, now thanks to the IT revolution. In everywhere we have a computer, so naturally you can feed it in the computer after coding the data. That is the first stage. The second stage in the data processing and analysis is data distribution and tabulation. When you are after the coding and feeding, you have the another thing, that is data distribution and tabulation. In tabulation, when you have a tabulation, it can be in three levels. One is a single variable can be taken as for analysis. The single variable analysis is called a univariate analysis. A single variable, for example, age and the level of awareness, that can be taken for analysis. That is called univariate analysis. That can be given in a table form. The another thing is bivariate table. Bivariate means taking two variables and relating to another variables for a particular analysis. For example, income and caste and their level of intelligence. So that could be the bivariate analysis. Then the third one is multivariate analysis. When you are taking up more than two variables for a particular analysis, normally in social science research, all the researchers are multivariate analysis only, because we employ so many variables, we try to test so many variables and try to link so many variables, and in order to identify the cause and effect of a particular variables on another variable. So there we have to do this particular multivariate analysis. But depending upon the requirement of the research, the researcher can employ either the univariate analysis or bivariate or multivariate analysis. These are given in the tabular form. Okay, the next stage is data analysis. Okay, now you have got the data in the tabular form. The next stage is you have to analyze the data. The first stage in analysis is categorization. You have to categorize in terms of themes or in terms of issues, then you have to put the data. The next thing is the distribution of frequency. I mean frequency in terms of the number of occurrences, the numerical values, the intensities, and all the things are assigned in the frequency distribution level. The third level is measurement. Measured in terms of the statistical measurement in terms of mean, mode, median, and other chi-square test and other things. So that's called measurement. So these three levels we are analyzing the data. Statistical analysis, we are subjecting the data into the statistical analysis. The next stage is data interpretation. After collecting the massive data with a lot of labor and a lot of skill, after analyzing all the things, the next important stage is data interpretation. Unless you interpret the data, the research is not completed. You cannot just give the data in the form of tables or in the form of just giving the numbers. The numbers will not speak. But with the help of the numbers and the figures, you have to speak. That is called interpretation. Interpretation may be either mere descriptive or descriptive plus analytical. What do you mean by descriptive and analytical? Descriptive means just mere describing what is what. This much of percentage is in favor of this particular party, or this much of percentage is not approving this particular government policy. That's a mere description. Analytical means going a step further and finding out why this particular group supports this particular party, why this particular caste is not approving this particular policy measures of the government. What are the socio-economic, cultural factors that influence that particular opinion? So when you are going into the deep, when you are going to have the concomitant of facts and you are trying to find out the relation, causal relationship with so many variables, then it is called analytical. But naturally the descriptive also will come in, but when you analyze in an analytical manner, then only you can have a meaningful interpretation of your data. Okay, the next stage is diagrammatic representation. We have had the tables and we are trying to interpret with the help of tables and other things. The next stage is presenting in a more simpler and a clear manner, so that it is given in the form of diagrams. It can be, our results can be presented in the form of graphs or diagrams itself. We have bar diagram, pie diagram, and in the form of pyramids and other things. So when you present the data in the form of the graphs, diagrams, what it tells, whatever you want to tell in so many pages, a single graphical presentation will tell the entire story, or a particular diagram will speak for the entire the research. So in such a way, we have to present and describe the data in the form of graphicals and this diagrams and other things in the form of diagrammatic presentation. Okay, now the final stage, the last one in the research design is called report writing. Though it is a last stage in the overall process of social science researchers, that is called report writing, it's not a least one, because report writing is something very serious one, because all the pain, the labor which you have taken for the entire process of from the initial stage of designing the research, going to the collection of data to the field, and then feeding and computer analysis, tabulation, and everything will go in waste unless you are presenting the report in a proper manner. When you talk about the proper manner, how? There are two things one has to keep in mind while writing a report, whether it's a thesis or a research report or a project report or anything else. The two things one has to keep in mind are, one is the format, the another one is content. These two things one has to keep in mind, because the research report normally differs from a report by a government. The report by a project report differs from other things. So naturally, one has to distinguish between the report by a government or report by a project, then the research report. Here we mean the research report for researchers like MPhil students or PhD students, when they are submitting the report after undergoing the entire tedious process of research work. So here two things we have to keep in mind. One is the format, another one is the content. Here format means what? Format, starting from the external appearance of the pages, external appearance, the outlook of the thesis, that is called from the content page onwards up to how you are having the footnotes, references, the bibliography, and all the things. You have to have the standard format. There is an MLA book that is called the Library of Congress book that's published. It's for how to write the footnote, how to write the bibliography, how the format should be, and all the things are given clearly. So that kind of a standard format should be followed as far as the external appearance of the report is concerned. Starting from the wrapper up to the last wrapper, the other side of the wrapper, all the things we have to follow strictly as per some standardized rules applicable and available and followed by some institution and other universities. So that should be kept in mind as far as the format of the thesis is concerned. That is the external outlook, outlook not only in terms of appearance but also in terms of the standard pattern that are to be followed throughout the thesis. The second one is the content. Content here means starting from the presentation of the statement of the problem in the introduction till the last chapter. Perhaps it may be a conclusion or conclusion plus suggestions or findings, whatever may be, all should have a logical continuity, logical link, and it should be knitted through logical systematic analysis and discussion. So there should not be any overlapping of any statements, and there should not be any redundancies in the discussion, and one has to avoid repetitions, because sometimes the same things in verbatim paragraphs are repeated without any meaning, and the researcher should be mindful of the thing, that is each and every syllabi, each and every word, each and every paragraph, each and every page should have a meaning when it is appearing in your research report. Without a meaning, without relevance, you should not have even a single syllabi in your research. All the things should have a relevance, should have a logical link and logical continuity. In such a way you have to present the content in your research report. If you have the content, this kind of systematic manner, definitely it will have the record impact or whatever the report wanted to achieve. After all the reports are prepared for a particular purpose. Even if it is a research report or a PhD report or a project report, it is aimed at a particular purpose. So in order to achieve that particular purpose, in order to get the overwhelming good response of the readers, one has to keep in mind these things while preparing their final report. So with this, I hope we have seen an overview of how the social science research process has to take place in the social science researchers. Thank you.